Hey everyone, before we jump into today's episode, I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, Open Water. As a chef and restaurant owner, I know how important it is not only to serve amazing food, but also take care of our planet. Open Water makes that easy with their eco-friendly bottled water packaged in 100% recyclable aluminum bottles, helping to reduce the plastic waste. What's even cooler? Open Water is a female-owned company leading the way in sustainability, something we can all get behind. And here's the best part. They're giving our listeners 20% off. Just use promo code INTHEWEEDS at checkout. So whether you're hydrating your team or stocking up for your restaurant, make the switch to Open Water. Delicious water, a healthier planet, and great discount. Cheers to that. All right, I'd like to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Saltwerk. You can check them out at saltwerk.com. You ever wonder what a pinch of Iceland would taste like? Well, you have it now in the most sustainable, flaky sea salt in the world. I've actually traveled to Iceland. Their geothermal powered island is beautiful. There's just a sense of freshness in the air over there, and it translates to this salt. I love this salt. It's delicious. It's the most sustainable. Again, you can buy just the normal flaky sea salt, but they also have infused salts, which I've been using at home lately a lot. They have this birch smoked sea salt that I love using with seafood. They have the lava salt, which is super black and cool looking. It's got a certain different type of taste to it. They have the Arctic thyme salt, which I use for my pickling liquids. And again, guys, just don't think of salt as something to season post recipe. You can use all these salts in the recipe alone. At We The Pizza, we use their flaky sea salt in our dough preparation. And they have this seaweed salt that I just used at an event that I loved at the Indy 500. I made a plant-based crab cake, and I was looking for a little bit more of that ocean flavor. Guess what I used? Saltwerk's seaweed salt gave me just that ocean flavor that I needed for my plant-based crab cake. It was a hit. Guys, if you want to use my promo code, you can. It's at In The Weeds Pod. You can use it on their website. You'll get a 20% discount on all their items. Stock up. This salt is amazing. And again, it is powered 100% by geothermal energy, the most sustainable sea salt on the market. You're welcome. Get yours. No Salt Bay in the house. Just salt. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the In the Weeds podcast, where we dive deep into the craziness of the restaurant industry and so much more. We discuss food, beverage, even food policy issues. Basically, if you love to eat and drink and are curious about this industry, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Spike Mendelsohn, a recovering celebrity chef, a long-life restaurant rat, from washing dishes in my family's business to cooking at Michelin star restaurants and competing in reality cooking competitions and serving as an advocate for food policy issues. My life is always in the weeds. We're broadcasting live from the District of Columbia, our nation's capital. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, Michael F. Curtin Jr., our friend who is the Chief Executive Officer of DC Central Kitchen, celebrating its 35th anniversary. Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Spike. It's great to be here.
Look at this. We're finally doing it, my man.
After all this time.
After all these years. How long have we worked together for? Man, it's over a decade, my friend.
Well over a decade.
Well over a decade. I want to shout out some stats so people can, listen to the podcast can truly understand the effect that DC Central Kitchen is having, your hard work, everyone that surrounds you, your team. So by basically the end of 2025, and Jason, thank you for putting these little tidbits together over here. By the end of 2025, DC Central Kitchen will have trained 250 people trained for new jobs each year, 20,000 volunteers annually, 500,000 fruits and vegetables delivered to corner stores annually. That's a lot of fruit and vegetables. 200 million added to the local economy annually. I did not know that. That is a big number.
We can dive into that one.
Well, I would love to. 1 million invested annually in local farms. 25,000 meals prepared daily. What an amazing thing. DC Central Kitchen, 35th anniversary coming up soon. Started in 1989. Guys, this is a legit company here, right?
Well, it is, Spike. Thank you. I'd like to think so. I mean, our budget this year was over $40 million.
Yeah.
And we employ almost 320 folks. Half of them are graduates from our training program, and we can talk about that. But it is a big enterprise, and as most restaurant operations are, or food operations are, it's a very delicate ballet every day to make to get the incoming and the outgoing matching.
Oh yeah,
and having that all work in the right way is
pretty. I want to talk about all that stuff, but are you good? Too loud or?
It's cutting in and out. It's good now.
Okay, all right. Just let us know. I want to get to all the facts about DC Central Kitchen, and listen, I'm one of your biggest fans, as you know. I love it here. We're in the new facility. It's amazing. If you haven't been, you have to come check this out. Volunteer. But I'm here today. I want to know the man behind the man behind the curtain a little bit more, and I want to understand really where your passion for food and your passion for everything that you're doing right now came from. And it's like you were in the restaurant business, so where did food start for you, Mr. Michael Curtin?
Sure. Well, as you said in the intro, Spike, you're a recovering celebrity chef.
That's right.
I often say I'm a recovering restaurateur. I think once that's in your blood, it never really gets out.
Yeah.
I think my parents used to entertain at home a lot when I was a kid, and we used to, in our pajamas, sort of wait tables in the dining room. I remember that vividly. I just always loved the idea of entertaining, of creating experiences. Really, that's what we do in restaurants.
Yeah.
When I was building my restaurant, a mentor in the business came over one night. I was sanding down the bar, and he reminded me and used a phrase that I use all the time now. He said, Mike, you gotta think of this as living theater.
Yeah.
This is a place where people come to be entertained, not just to eat, right? Often we think of food as sustenance, but food is much, 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 much more than that. And we are in the business of creating experiences.
Yeah.
And I always loved that idea. And that's, I think, was part of what drove me into the restaurant business. And even though it's a little different now, we are still using food to create experiences, but more than that, creating opportunity and creating life-changing circumstances, and really using food for all of its power and all of its glory in really, really powerful ways.
Yeah. It's funny you say that as it's a vehicle for entertainment. My father, which you know very well, you know my entire family very well, he always says it's not the restaurant business, it's show business, right? Yeah. Harvey Mendelsohn always said it's show business.
It is.
And so I love to hear the story about you and the PJs and serving. And so, what was your relationship with food? I mean, where were you living? Where were you from?
I grew up in the D.C. area.
Okay,
grew up mostly in Maryland. I was born in D.C., went to high school here at D.C. at Gonzaga.
Right.
I've lived in Virginia now for many years, so I'm one of these weird, or sort of an oddity within the native DMV community where I've lived in all three areas. Usually you pick a place and you stay.
Sure.
And
You're truly DMV, baby.
You don't go.
Yeah.
I am DMV. But I never envisioned this as a career. I went off to college like many people, thinking that I was pre-med.
Yeah.
Until I took Math 107 my freshman spring, and didn't work out as I had imagined.
I don't even know what Math 107 means.
Whatever.
Like,
it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
it's math.
There's new math right now. Let's not get into
number,
it.
Really,
I do with my son.
That I was not good
at.
Yeah. And so I was frantically. So this is I'll try to tell the story quickly, but I was frantically my second year looking for classes that didn't end in ology, as I had to recreate my whole life. And a buddy of mine suggested that I take this one professor who happened to be teaching a course about modern Japanese history, and I loved the course. It was fascinating to me. He made a comment one day in class about Buddhism and Christianity being very at odds with each other, and I found that odd because I had read in high school. I had read a little bit by a Trappist monk named Thomas Merton, and he wrote how Zen and Christianity can actually they're very intertwined and close and have a lot of similarities. And I decided I was going to do some more thinking about that, and ended up becoming a religion major, ended up going and living in Japan. And while I was in Japan, I found a style of restaurants called izakayas or obariyakis that are very prevalent over there. Was just fascinated by what the experience that restaurant created. And it was a show.
Yeah.
You go to those, I imagine you've been. And
I haven't been to Japan yet, but I've been, and I want to go. And so wait, how old were you when you went there?
I was 22.
22.
Yeah.
Wow.
And some of these places, they're literally open fires around, and people are cooking indoors. It's pretty cool how that happens there. And people are yelling and screaming, and the food's going, and it is a show. And you go not just for dinner, you go for the night. You're there.
Yeah.
You're ordering food for the table, and it's all small plates. And this was before small plates were small plates,
a thing.
right? And you get the whether it's beer or sake, it comes in large bottles. You share, you pour each other's. And it was just such a communal experience. I loved it. And I said, man, this would be really cool to have back in the States. And I came back to Japan, and I came back from Japan not knowing what I was going to do.
So how long were you there for?
I was there for 3.5 years.
And so was this was this your biggest culinary kind of moment at a young age, or were you before 20s? Was food much part of the household?
Well,
what were the
will
meals?
say that we always ate as a family.
You always ate as a family.
We sat down at there was there was not even a notion of watching TV and eating dinner at the same time. We sat at the table. If my dad was home from work, that was great. It didn't often happen, but we ate as a family every single night, and that was a big deal. So we weren't, and my mom cooked. We didn't go out a lot, but so food was a part of what we did. But I don't think I realized at the time how maybe unusual that was. That it was a very family communal kind of thing.
Yeah,
and we always had big holiday events with families and friends, and Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving. And cooking the whole thing. So we all did it. It was all part of growing up with my parents. And then I worked like many people in college. I worked in bars and restaurants and over the summers, and just loved that sort of the energy, the vibe.
Yes.
And I happened to go to school up in the Berkshires, and there was where they have a big theater festival every summer. And one summer I worked up there, and it was. You're waiting on people like Paul Newman and Christopher Reeve and Susan Sarandon, and all of a sudden you're talking to these folks, and it's just crazy cool. But food again is that sort of great equalizer. Everyone you're serving, they want you to bring them something, and it's just. Did
you go to Paul Newman's restaurant when he had one with Michel Nichon? Do I need to fix that? Is it just staticky?
No, it just keeps going in and out. I don't know if it's the.
I think it's the adapter.
It's all right. Listen, this is live podcasting, guys. I'm just going to do a shout out to our sponsor, Just Iced Tea, right now, and DC Central Kitchen. Most sustainable organic tea on the market. They carry it here. Thank you for carrying it here.
Is it that you're not hearing it, or is it coming through one side?
It goes completely out.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just give him the spare set real quick.
Let's not skimp on cords, shall we? Let's spend the big bucks.
The big bucks for the podcast room right now.
Yeah. My producer just told me, he's like, your camera is more than our entire studio.
Ooh, see, he's got. They didn't skimp on.
You did not skimp on the camera.
Yeah.
So if you want, I can plug you in those headphones.
Yeah, sweet. Jason usually doesn't really need headphones. It looks cool, but he's not on camera, so.
Good.
Sweet.
Okay.
We're still recording, right?
All right. Where were we? Paul Newman. So
did you go to Michel Nichon's place?
I never did. I didn't know Michel until long after.
Got it. Because he always talks about his Paul Newman. Yeah. All right. So you had a certain degree, like most in the business and food at home all the time, but Japan seemed to be like the thing that lit you on fire, though.
Well, it was in many ways. It was a catalyst, not necessarily for food. I saw food as a different kind of thing there. I saw it as more of a community building experience.
Yeah.
and thought the way that the Japanese in these particular restaurants ate, I thought was fascinating.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this would be really cool to have something like this over in the States. Food seemed to me much more transactional. You go in, you eat, you leave, and you do something else. It's what you did in between or before and after.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to be the thing.
That's the thing. That's America. We're just so transactional here.
Yeah, and they were like, okay, let's hurry up and eat so we can do this.
Yeah.
But at these places you went, that's all you did. And you stayed for 3 hours, 4 hours. It was amazing. And you had you had great food and great times and laughing. And but I didn't imagine that I would do that. But when I came back from Japan, I really had no idea what I was going to do, except that I was convinced because I had lived in Japan, and this was at the height of the Japanese economy and Japan Inc. and all that. And
you speak Japanese?
And I spoke Japanese, and I figured, I don't know for what, but certainly someone's going to pay me a lot of money.
Sure.
Like, I just imagined that, right? Oddly, the first job offer I got was from the Hay Adams Hotel here in D.C., which is for those of you outside of D.C., it's a boutique 4-star historic hotel directly across from the White House.
Shout out to the Hay Adams.
Hay Adams. And the reason this was, it had recently been purchased by 2 Japanese brothers who were the Sanyo, not Sony, but Sanyo, which was sort of like the next level
of Sony.
Of electronic companies in
Got it.
Japan. But it was pretty big, and we had Sanyo over here. But apparently when they opened their first factory in America, it was in Arkansas. And at the time, there was a young fella named Bill Clinton who was the governor of Arkansas.
Oh, that guy.
And so these brothers, when Bill became president, the brothers wanted a place to stay for inauguration, so they decided to buy the nicest hotel closest to their buddy Bill.
Casual.
Just to go.
So casual. Let's just buy the Hay Adams.
We're going for the weekend.
Wow.
And then I think they said, well, we have this hotel. We might as well try to market it a little bit to the Japanese business folks that are coming over to D.C., which was a lot then. And so I was hired to market the hotel to Japanese companies and Japanese business executives. So it was really cool. And the coolest part was because I was sort of seen as the owner's guy in the hotel, I could pretty much go anywhere I wanted to. I would go and hang out with the chef in his office and get to know the folks in the kitchen and see what they were doing. I had never really been, besides picking up food when I was working in college, I'd never really been in a kitchen.
I had no clue you had that much background with the Hay Adams.
Yeah,
I mean, I love that place.
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah.
It was. I was 3 amazing years, and these folks, they had great plans. They were going to buy more hotels or golf courses, and I was like, this is perfect. This is amazing. And then the Japanese economy went up, and the bubble burst.
The bubble burst.
And with it, all my plans and future. And so at that point, I said, well,
what was that bubble? What burst that bubble?
That was the Japanese economy was just so overheated, and it was just doing so much, and they had overextended themselves, and they just couldn't keep up with it. And and so all of the travel that was going on, all of the money that they were pumping into foreign investment just sort of dried up.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I've been thinking about this restaurant thing, and I sort of have this experience now working with chefs and marketing and events, and it's like, I'll give it a shot. But before that, I said, well, I should get some more experience. So I worked for 2 brothers who owned a place on 10th Street across from Ford's Theater called Dixie Grill, which was sort of a hip place. Same guy was involved with the Insect Club and 930 Club, or not 930, but Insect Club.
That was before my time. The Insect Club?
Insect Club. You didn't know the Insect Club?
I didn't know.
Dude, that was the shit.
I came here in 2008. Was it still around?
So this was probably not. This was mid-90s.
Got it.
That was a scary time to be around Ford's Theater in D.C.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, so there was a big gulf between 10th Street and actually Haleo was just opening then, and those 3 or 4 blocks in between there were really no man's land, which is what now is where the arena was basically electronic / porn shops and
I can't imagine because
galleries.
I'll tell you, when I got here in 2008, it didn't feel that much better.
No, well,
and I can't imagine 1990 here in DC.
It was crazy. But so that was a great experience. Then I worked at McCormick and Schmick's for a while when they opened their first shop on K Street. And then I opened my place in 98 in Falls Church. And originally it was intended to be was going to be more of this Asian style, but what I decided to do is do American small plates. And again, in 98, small plates weren't.
Jose hadn't hit the scene yet.
Well, he had just hit it. But
Okay.
it was Jose. Oddly enough, more people were talking about that than my place. So that's how I ended up doing that. Long and winding path.
What are American small plates?
Well, it was just doing more of what we would have assumed as are called like starters, So
Like crab cakes,
we did crab
buffalo
cakes.
wings,
We did some wings. We baby lamb chops.
Oh, yeah.
Just
American
we did some
style,
sweetbreads.
just food, yeah.
Just more to be shared. It didn't catch on as I had imagined it or hoped it would.
I mean, listen, and sometimes it just doesn't. I've been there multiple times in life. So, did you have a chef for this restaurant? Or
I did. So the opening chef was Gillian Clark. Actually, she had been the chef at Evening Star.
Oh yeah, I love Evening Star. Great restaurant.
She was awesome. We really got along well in terms of our theory on what we wanted to do. She really, it just worked.
Yeah.
It was good. I mean, it was really good. From the outside, the food was good. It smelled good. It sounded good. It tasted good. But we were suffering from most of the maladies that independent restaurateurs do. Even though I had painstakingly told all my investors that exactly we wouldn't do any of these things that always happen.
Of course, no, you tell them we're
did.
not going to do any of this shit.
This will never happen to us.
We did all of that shit.
Yeah, we did all of that,
and then some,
and then we made some more up. Yeah. So it was an incredible learning experience. But during that time is when I got to know the kitchen and Robert Egger through.
Yeah, so let's get to
RW.
So let's get to that. So I mean, so you're doing your thing in the restaurant industry. It's not hard for people. It's very hard for people listening out there. I mean, so how long did you have that restaurant for?
Oddly enough, about the same amount of time, almost 4 years.
Okay.
I was in Japan. It was 98 to fall of 2002.
Well, not a bad run.
No, it wasn't.
Not a bad run.
I mean, better than most, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, listen, for I think the statistic is like restaurants that open up maybe like 9 months.
Yeah.
Depending on how prepared they are. Jason, don't write that down and quote me on that. I just fucking pulled that out of my ass.
Yeah.
But it's something like that for sure. So what led us to this beautiful effort of DC Central Kitchen, which, by the way, we're sitting in the most state-of-the-art DC Central Kitchen that has ever been, but it was not always that way. It was, and we were going to, let's get to the gritty of it. Yeah.
Sure.
So, like, why, how did you get involved? Yeah.
Well, what was interesting is during my time at Broad Street Grill, which was the name of my place, that's when I said I got to know the kitchen. I got to know Robert. We would meet up or just run into each other at these restaurant association events, and almost inevitably we would gravitate towards a corner of the bar, maybe a bottle of tequila in between us, and Robert would tell me about his ideas for nightclubs and all these things he wanted to do, and it sounded great. I didn't quite get all of it, and I didn't understand the breadth of what was possible at DC Central Kitchen at the time, but I was fascinated by the idea and what he was trying to do, but still never thought it as a career.
What was the idea? Like the starter idea? Because I know that there's been many.
Sure.
You've evolved so many times, but what was the starter idea?
So the start of the idea was Robert went out one night with a group of folks from a church, much against his will. Not something he was not a volunteering kind of guy. He was not a real community guy. As he was a guy, as he says, a barely graduated high school stoner who wanted to open a nightclub.
Yeah.
So he was working at nightclubs in town, and ended up with this church group because when he got engaged, this was the church that charged the least amount of money for a wedding. And you also had to volunteer with their group. So he was out feeding folks on the street and was just stunned by the number of people in line in this incredibly wealthy city. And stunned by the fact that the people that were getting meals from these church folks one night didn't match what he had in his mind of what hungry people would look like. They weren't sort of the Depression era poor from our high school textbooks. They were people that you would walk by on the street and not think anything was wrong or concerned or there was an issue. And so he saw that, and he saw that this system of feeding people was almost just, if not expanding the line of people, it was making sure that line would always be there. So people were coming to get their food, and his friends at the church were greeting them by name, and Robert asked them how they knew them, and they said with almost a gleeful sense of pride, they've been coming here for years, as if that was a good thing. And Robert said, holy shit, that's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. This whole system we have is not working for except it's certainly not working for the folks in line. It may be working for the people that are handing out food, and this is where Robert recognized that this system of charity that we have is really had been flipped somehow to be more about the redemption of the giver and not the liberation of the receiver. And so Robert wanted to create a system that was based on liberation, and that food was used to create that liberation, not as an end, but as a means, as a tool. So we had been thinking in this country that if we just hand out free food, we're going to end hunger. We're not. That will never, ever happen. We're never going to feed our way out of hunger. But we can use food to create opportunities, to create jobs. So we can take food from, again, Robert was a nightclub guy, a restaurant guy. We can take food, he thought, from restaurants, not only that I work in, but all my friends work in, and the caterers around town, bring this food to a central location, food that we were going to throw out at the end of the night, re-prepare it and make it healthy and nutritious meals, and not give it out on the streets, but give it to organizations that are helping people get out of line. So recovery programs, job reentry programs, job training programs, empowerment programs for women who are victims of abuse. Whatever it was, we can take the food line item off of someone's budget so they can focus on empowering and liberating their clients. And then we can take some of those folks that are in line, and while we're making these meals, we can train them to work in these same restaurants where we're getting this leftover food. So taking, in essence, leftover food, marginalized individuals, putting them together, and creating this incredibly tight circle of empowerment, liberation, and opportunity.
Yes.
And then using food in the restaurant business to do all of those things. Because as you well know, Spike, and I imagine if I ask you today, if I asked you 10 years ago or 10 years from now, if I say, what's the biggest issue you're dealing with at your restaurant? And you'll say, lack of staff. Like that's the thing. Like, how do we get more people that are trained, that are dependable, that want to be part of this business? And so that
now
was the
now
kernel
more
of the
so
idea.
than ever, by
Right,
the way.
absolutely.
Now more so than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was how that was the notion, the idea that I found very intriguing at the beginning. But even, as I said, even then, I didn't recognize like how far we could take that, or
Right.
what were the possibilities that existed there.
So with that idea, what was the first action? Like what to market? Was it working with individual restaurants, like you just said, and you did centralize it, or did you have these restaurants prepare them and you brought? I mean, I love that you mentioned it was a means to an end, using foods as a means to an end. I think people confuse a lot of that sometimes, right? On how to
Absolutely.
get what you want out of the product that you're serving.
Right. So the first thing, there were a couple things that had to happen to get this thing off the ground. And the first one was Robert felt that if he could convince sort of the nonprofit or the community, in his case it was these folks from the church, if we could sort of flip this model a little bit, we could actually ultimately have a greater long-term impact. But what he found was that there wasn't much interest in doing that, because people said, well, if this really works, then what will we do for our volunteer experience? And Barb's like, are you shitting me? Like,
Right.
that's
Like,
the
that-
fucking
that's
thing
what-
that
yeah.
we're worried about?
Yeah.
Like, no, that's crazy. So that's when Robert decided to do this on his own. But the next group, in a more, I guess, open-minded audience, was speaking to restaurants and saying, hey, I got this idea that you might think it's crazy, but stick with me here. What if you give me the food that you're going to throw away? I'll come by in a truck every night after you close. I'm going to bring it to this other place, and then we're going to train people. And I say this all the time, Spike, is that if it were not for the support and buy-in of the restaurant industry, then we would not be where we are today.
Yeah.
It was that group of individuals who have to think a little creatively, a little outside the box all the time, to think about how can we use things on the margins, because that's where we're living,
That's right.
And we
Shout
have to
out
get
to chefs, restaurateurs taking risks.
absolutely
To always
And
pushing
so
the envelope.
It was those folks who said, "I get it." It wasn't the politicians, it wasn't the folks that were doing this as a career or profession. This were chefs and restaurateurs and folks in the hospitality business that saw this possibility, and really that's how it started, and then we just kept pushing and seeing what we could do, how we could do more.
Yeah. So I love that story, and I love that the industry was there, because we're often the first responders. Even throughout this COVID situation, we're making meals, and it almost seems we always are there, in some capacity.
Yeah, I think I mean you know this. When I had my place, I can't, and I asked for it.
Yeah.
I said I'm going to be in Falls Church. I want to be part of the community. And yes, I'm going to sponsor the Little League team, and I'm going to do this for the church bazaar and do all those things. But man, I mean, a day doesn't go by when you don't get 3, 4, 5, 6 requests to do this and do that, and the answer is usually yes, right? I mean, as the restaurateurs, they are the first responders, right? They are. I mean, this is what World Central Kitchen has evolved into. It's sort of going back to the way restaurants are, and one of the things that when I in my business plan I wrote about the colonial tavern, and this is where communities came together. This is where if you needed help to build your barn, you went to the tavern and you talked about it. You wanted to hear news, you went to the tavern and you talked about it. You needed to solve a community problem, you went to the tavern and you talked about it. And so restaurants have always played, again, food has always played that role. And restaurants are seen as, like, we are on that first line. We are those first responders. And we're good at it, right? I mean, and we recognize that food is about building community. And so we get asked to do it a lot. And I think, and again, the restaurant community was there for DC Central Kitchen, and has continued to be there as we've grown over the last 3+ decades.
Yeah, and then there was another layer. So I remember my first introductory was going to your building. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about this because I want to understand a little bit more about the progression, right? So I remember going in. It was in a very dicey place in DC, in the back of a parking lot. And you were originally, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to get anything wrong, you were working with formerly incarcerated people that were looking for second, third, fourth chances in life, right? And was that at the time the workforce that you focused on, which I thought had a lot of merit, and by the way, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I've hired plenty of people out of DC Central Kitchen, people that still work with me, people that are running some of my restaurants right now, one that's on the board, so we'll get into that, but it seems like on top of all the good that you were doing and feeding the people and the trainings, you're also pulling people out of they're giving them a real chance at life, right? By training in culinary. And how much is that still part of the workforce of today's DC Central Kitchen?
So that is still absolutely the heart and soul of DC Central Kitchen. So we're doing more and more and more and more meals and a lot more social enterprise. Like when I started 20 years ago, we were doing, I think, 2,500 meals a day. We're doing 16,000 a day now. But none of that would matter if we weren't doing our training, and if we weren't training individuals that have been systemically, generationally excluded from meaningful employment opportunities. And many of those folks then and today are folks that have been involved with the criminal justice system, individuals that have battled with substance abuse disorder, women that have been trafficked or abused, other folks that have experienced homelessness and other kinds of other traumas, to get them to employment opportunities in the sector, like places like yours, and jobs here at DC Central Kitchen. So that is and always has been the core. Again, that's why we say we fight hunger differently. We use food as a tool to get people employed, and not to give food away, but to give people in a place where they can buy their own food. Like that's empowerment and liberty, that's the message. You know, if you go back to, even if you want to talk about Dr. King, you know, his message was about economic empowerment and inclusion. The sit-ins were not necessarily about, or a lot of the civil rights movement was not about necessarily an ability for someone to walk into and sit down at a restaurant. It was the ability to walk into and sit down in a restaurant and be able to pay for it because you had a good job that paid good money. You know, the American farm workers strikes. They're like, why should workers who are picking grapes and lettuce that are sitting on people's tables not be able to, how is it possible they can't afford to walk into a grocery store and buy those grapes and lettuce? So that's what we were talking about here. And so, yes, today, and always, we will be working with marginalized groups, as I said, that have been marginalized through this system, this economic system of exclusion that exists in the United States, and has plagued individuals generationally.
Yeah.
So that is absolutely where we focus.
How much in the weeds were you at that point in your life? Meaning, like, what was the learning curve for you dealing with people that had, you know, been in trouble with the criminal justice, you know, or had drug problems? Like, it just seems like such a huge effort to take that person in and have them give you a chance also, right? Doesn't it go both ways? You're giving them a chance, but they're also in a way taking a chance on you.
So yeah, so there's a lot there, Spike. You know, one of the things that we when people talk about the kitchen, it is talked about as a place for second chances, third chances, fourth chances. And we make the mistake of thinking that when we say those things, that we are speaking exclusively about the individuals that have been in prison, you know, that have suffered homelessness, you know, that have battled addiction and didn't have family or medical support to get them through those times. But as a former colleague of mine, a guy named Ron Swanson, who is retired and worked with our training program for years, always said, he said, everyone who comes to the kitchen is a little broken. You know, everyone who comes to the kitchen is looking for a little more, is trying to be that person they want to be, they hope to be, they dream they could be, to be part of something bigger. And there is no question that is true about me. You know, I mean, we've sort of glossed over this and, you know, jokingly said this happened in my restaurant, but dude, I was 40 years old. I had 3 young kids. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I hadn't, you know, I had made sure in that restaurant time that everyone got paid except me. And, you know, my wife was a teacher. We were struggling and I was terrified. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I found the kitchen, and the kitchen gave me my second chance. So, I mean, I came into this place from a place of gratitude and humility. And I think that's what makes the kitchen different in some ways, because we don't approach this as a typical nonprofit, like one side helping another side because of privilege or position or whatever it is. But to me, I saw the kitchen as a lifesaver for me, and I was grateful to be here, and I was really happy to learn about it from the others that were here already. You know, so it was something that if I look back on it, I probably should have thought about a little more maybe. But I think I was very fortunate to have a place that I came in the way I did, that allowed me to see the power, the liberating and redemptive power of the kitchen, without having to put that on. You know.
Yeah.
I mean,
just very organically.
Yeah.
I mean, and it speaks volumes to the person you are that's been running the kitchen, and the respect you've had from everybody in this thing. You know, it's one. You know, I always tell people it's one thing to tell people to wash dishes, but it's one thing to know how to wash the dishes yourselves, right? And tell that person to wash the dishes.
Well, you know, there's a lot of bosses, as I'm sure you've had or been around, will say, like, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do. But the turn of phrase there, and this is where it is often different in restaurants, is I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I either haven't done or I'm not doing.
Right.
Or not that I would do. That's a little
the would do,
like,
get the would do out of there.
Not really interested in that, you know?
So, okay, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, Mike, going back to the early days of the development of DC Central Kitchen, what was like a normal day in your life in like the early 2000s?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was going to just ask that one. I'm just messing with the MF.
Well, I think, where we are now, as you said, Spike, in this state-of-the-art facility, it's easy to forget that for 30 years, more or less, we were in a windowless basement of a decaying, decrepit homeless shelter.
It was bad, guys. You guys. Let's paint the picture a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Paint it for them. They got to understand where we came from.
So one of the things when I'm giving tours here at this new facility, I always stop when we say here the restrooms, and people are like, okay, and I said, we plumbing didn't work all the time.
Yeah.
And funny thing today, we're having, we have these fancy lights that dim and, motion controlled and everything. And we're having a little bit of an issue with one of them. I was talking with a colleague and they go, well, at least it's not sewage. I was like, wow, I forgot. Good
True.
day. Good
True
day.
that. Good day.
So there was always something, and we kept the equipment going. Everything was donated. Everything was second or third or fourth hand. We kept it together with shoelaces, bubble gum, duct tape, and, love and hope. But we would have, the kettles would go down. And we would have 3,000 meals to go out, and we would have to figure out what do we, in the middle of cooking chickens in a kettle or something.
No 2 days were the same. I guarantee.
And if you were planning on a donation coming in from a grocery store or somewhere, and it didn't happen. But the thing is, the meals had to go out every single day, no matter what, and they always did. We've never, ever, ever, ever missed a meal in 35 plus years now. So there was making sure that the lights were going on, that the food was coming in, that the freezers, the refrigerators were working, so I'll tell you a story that sort of maybe sort of symbolizes a shift in a bit of our mindset at the kitchen, and so it was not long after I started. I started October 4th, and we were almost immediately planning for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was a big day, and sadly, it's still a big day in this, as if people are only hungry on Thanksgiving. August too, but we had this old walk-in that had been cobbled together, sort of Frankenstein together from multiple other walk-ins, and the compressor was probably actually supposed to be a refrigerator, and it was kaput. It was done. And from what I was told is people would typically donate a lot of turkeys, not only that we would use at Thanksgiving, but throughout the rest of the year, good protein. But our freezer wasn't working, so we had no place to keep these turkeys. And I'm like, okay, so we need to get a new freezer. Like, we can't get a freezer. Like, why can't we? Well, we can't buy anything. Well, why can't we? Because everything we have to have is secondhand. Like, but why? So I said, so you're going to tell me that we're going to turn down 6,000 pounds of free protein because somehow someone said we can't buy a freezer to keep this protein in? This doesn't make sense to me. So for the first time in our lives, we actually did a campaign to raise money for to buy a new piece of equipment.
A turkey freezer.
Turkey freezer, yeah.
I love this stuff.
And we got it. It was amazing. We outshot our goals, and this was back in it's so crazy to think relative to what we do now. But I think we wanted to raise like maybe $20,000 or something, and we just saw that as almost no way.
Yeah.
But the community responded. It was amazing, and we had this beautiful brand new freezer installed like the Monday before Thanksgiving, but then no turkeys. So we called the news, and the TV station came down.
They flew the coop.
Yeah,
they flew the coop.
And there was a line around the corner. It was one of the most, I will never forget. It was 20 years ago, but just people were just lined up until like late Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, coming in to give turkey. So that was a day, but I guess the larger feeling of days there was always something that we were going to have to overcome.
Yeah.
It was always
Always
it
an
was
uphill battle over
yeah.
there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really up. I mean, I'm sure you have some more common day struggles these days here and that, but to get to this point was a milestone. Everything in between when you started to hear it was a huge milestone. I remember, I mean, the one thing that attracted me the most about DC Central Kitchen and why I became such a loyal contributor to trying to help out wherever I can. And by the way, I often tell people, chefs specifically, everyone's going to come for you for charity, for events, for this and that. But I always tell them, like, they are, chefs are asking, what's one of your biggest recommendations? I was like, listen, everyone's going to come after. Find an organization that you really believe in and focus all your energy within that organization, right? 100%. And for me, it's a lesson I learned very early on because I grew up in the restaurant industry. Like I said, I was a restaurant rat. I grew up with my parents in the industry, my grandfather, my sister, family restaurant, chaotic. But we always had some give back, and we always had, and us, it was St. Jude's back in the day when we were working in Florida. But, also, for kitchens for me were therapeutic. I mean, listen, I was no easy kid. I'm sure there's a lot of stories out there. You can ask my mother, my sister. I still fall off every once in a while. But when coming into a kitchen, there was a sense of preparing food that was comforting, a sense of reward. I started something, I had to finish something, and also just the mechanism of the routine of a kitchen, right? Whether it's the chopping or cooking on the line or what have you, it always improved my life. It always drew me out of any type of depression I would have, any anger or whatever it was. And when I walked, and of course I've cooked in kitchens all over the world, and I've had experienced that level of feelings in different kitchens, but when I first walked into DC Central Kitchen, you guys gave me that class. I think it was a chili recipe or something to do. And I walked into the old kitchen. I couldn't find it. I said, I must have the wrong address, right? Like how many times it doesn't even show up on GPS or it's like, don't go here, right? Like I can't find it. And then finally there's like a dingy door on the corner. I think you were even housing people.
Well, we were in the basement of a shelter.
You were in the so you were in the basement of a shelter, and I remember walking in and the 16 students there, and they all told me their stories. Right? You had everyone tell me their stories and where they're coming from. They all had chef coats on at the time, right? I think it was, or some version of chef coat, and I was in awe. I was in awe because there was a sense of curiosity from all these people that came from many different backgrounds, whether it was a drug problem, a criminal, whatever it was. They were all there, united. And as the class went on, I noticed the joy that it brought all these people, right? Like it almost they were taking a step away from their life that wasn't all that great, right? And stepping in the kitchen to do something beyond just for themselves, right? To feed someone, but also feed their own soul at the same time in a way. And I remember it as clear as day. I was like, wow, something really amazing is happening here. And of course you and the team and everybody involved was, the cherry on the top. But I always remember that day. And it is why I have always committed to working with you guys, because it's just like you've seemed to even bottle it up now, right? Where you're having a lot of success. But that was the moment for me. So like, to me, sometimes I think your secret sauce is just getting these people to handle food. Right.
Well, I think, the restaurant business, what's great about the restaurant business is that most people who are walking in these doors, your doors, we've experienced something, and everyone has, I think maybe in the restaurant business, we just admit it a little more readily. But what we recognize is we have a job to do, and we have a confined period of time to do it in. And I don't give a shit what happened yesterday or where you came from or what, look, I've got my problems, you've got your problems, but we've got something to do for the next 4 hours, and let's just do it. And there's that sense of equality and or equity, at least, we are all in this task together. And everyone has a value. Whatever you do is important to getting that meal on that plate. And it doesn't matter if whose took is highest or who, like, we're all getting here together. And I think that has been what has drawn so many people to the restaurant business in general. And it's certainly been that experience that's been shared by so many has drawn people to us and to work with the folks that come in here. And for the first time, many of the folks that are working with us for the first time in their lives, someone's actually asking them in a respectful way to do something that's going to mean something larger, something more.
Yeah.
You know, again, let's get this task done together. And they're not asking about where they came from or you know, how many years they've been doing this or you know, been here or been there. It's all about what we can do now. And so that is the immediacy of that, and the immediacy that the restaurant business offers, I think has been that great equalizer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, someone like you, when you walked in that first time, I mean, you were hot off of, or just off of, I don't know,
Top
if it was
Chef.
All Stars or the first one, but it was
the first one. Yeah.
But you were, you know, and so you know, people are, you know, these are folks that had been in prison for 10, 20, 30 years, and no one had ever bothered to even say hello to them or ask them how they're doing. And all of a sudden there's a TV star coming in and working with them, and that's a big freaking deal, man. And you know, but as is often the case, and as I think you're saying, is that, you know, you took away more from them probably than they took away from you.
If not equally, 100%. You're right. I mean, and that's why, and the kitchen keeps giving to me, you know, in many different degrees. You know, could it be? I just want to make sure that like the listeners understand what the program is, basically, like, and very concise. You don't have to dive deep, and like what it looks like from getting a person in to what they're running through. Because, you know, you never know. There may be some people out there listening that are having some of the same issues and can use a place like this. So
this is not a culinary program for someone who wants to, you know, a career change later in life. And, you know, I was a teacher for a long time. Now I really like cooking. I want to do that. This is for folks who have been, as I said, you know, very much excluded from opportunities at meaningful employment. And often with histories, as we've said, with criminal involvement, with substance abuse, homelessness, other traumas. And the program is at least half or more, and I always argue for more, not in front of a stove or with a pot or a pan or a knife, but we really work on what we call empowerment skills, what are often called soft skills, life skills, are really asking our students to confront the reasons why they're here in the first place, and really delve into that. And then we use food to sort of soften the edges of that along the way, by doing basic culinary skills, knife skills, mother sauces, fabricated chicken, fabricated fish, that kind of stuff. But it's really the getting to know oneself. And in a way that's probably more meaningful than many of our students have had the opportunity to do. And I will tell you what's really funny, Spike, and you've probably seen this over your years with us, is that the students hate that. I mean, they loathe that.
Yeah.
You know, they come here, and no matter how many times we tell them, okay, there's another part to this program. It's not just cooking. You're not just getting a certificate, you know, and they're like, yeah. I don't think that, you know, it's you hear what you want to hear, right? And it's I talk to the students every class, the first day of every class, and I tell them, again, this is what it's going to be. And I tell them quite honestly, if you're thinking to your head right now, I'm telling you about the most important part of what's going to happen is in this classroom. And it's in this empowerment session. And if you're thinking to yourself right now that this guy's spouting bullshit, then you might as well pack up your books and leave, because it's not going to work. It's not, and it won't.
And you give it to them like that, honest, right?
100%, exactly, like that. And it has to be like that. And what will happen, and again, because I've seen it happen over 20 years, is that by the end of the 14 weeks with us, we have a little event most mornings before graduation. Sometimes it's a day or two before, when the students talk about their journey, and almost every time people start talking about how much they loved the empowerment session.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for that, they wouldn't have gotten through.
Yeah.
And it's just, it just makes me laugh every single time, because they hated that. They hated Jeff Rustin is our guy who teaches that. He's an amazing person. And they talk, you know, Mr. Jeff, I love Mr. Jeff. They hated Mr. Jeff.
Yeah.
They couldn't stand Mr. Jeff. They would come into my office and complain about Mr. Jeff. But that is the magic. That's part of the
That's
secret
the secret
sauce.
sauce. It has to be because, I mean, it's hard to look at oneself and admit that you need to fix yourself. I don't care if you're a recovering addict or if, you know, you could be the richest person in the world. It doesn't really matter. But like to look at yourself and really say, hey, there's something I really need to fix here. That's a powerful, you're introducing people to a secret sauce. That's a very powerful shift in someone's life. And for you guys to be able to honor that for them and really guide them, I think that's the everything, right? And I love how you said that. And food's just here to kind of distract you in a way, but it also brings a lot to the table. You know, at the same the means to the end that you were talking about. How is it? How does it ever get old? The graduations? It can't ever go old.
The graduations are amazing. They never get old. And so I'll tell you the fun story is. I think my first graduation was maybe 3 or 4 weeks after I started. It was not long. The first food fight was 3 or 4 weeks after I started too. Like all this stuff was crazy, and it was at the Hilton or the Hyatt, which was across the street across the alley from the kitchen back in the old space, and it was just so overwhelming for me. And I remember I was sitting in the audience, sitting next to Robert, and on stage. Standing up for whatever reason it was, but was one of our graduates. He was an older gentleman, probably in his 60s, you know, like me now, right? Yeah. And he was looking at, and I looked over in the audience, and he was looking at his adult daughter and her son, his grandson. Maybe he might have been 5, say. And the sense of pride and accomplishment, just that when they looked at each other, it was overwhelming. And from my, you know, privileged position, I would say, like, it was like this guy was graduating from Harvard Law School.
Sure.
You know, like, why Harvard Law School is any more important than DC Central Kitchen? It's not, right? Not. But that's where my head was.
I get you,
and I just said, my God, this is just amazing. And I leaned over to Robert, and I said, dude, this is just awesome. You must be so proud. And he goes, dude, the shit never gets old. Yeah. And so to answer your question, no, the shit never gets old.
Shit never gets old.
And it's just every time, it's just magical to see this transformation and self-transformation. Like, you know, we want to be really, really careful. Like, we don't do this, right?
No, they transform
We
themselves,
put it here and say, take it if you want it, but it's up to you. And people, you know, put in this really, really hard work and make that happen. And you know, just sidebar quick, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to be in a place like we are now, to a place that was respectful and dignified of that work that was being done.
Yes.
And to say to these folks, look, we value what you're doing. Yeah. You shouldn't be doing it in a decrepit basement of a shelter. You need to be out in a place that is worthy of the work and change
showcasing. Yeah. And that's the one thing I love about, you know, what you guys done in this new facility is that people were always very happy and energetic at DC Central Kitchen, but also the surroundings were a little rough, like you said, right? So that could still bring you down sometimes.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And just being surrounded by that kind of stuff brings you down. What I've noticed by far, the comparison to the old one, is the kitchens. You have all the open windows here in the kitchens. You're walking by, you have the grab and go area where you can go get a great sandwich, this, that. There's a cashier. They have to take your order. The hospitality here and the vibe, the energy from whether it's the students or the volunteers or the people at the front desk that are working, it's on point.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes we work like months to figure this out in our restaurants. Here, you can see how proud people are to wear that chef coat.
Yeah.
Or to serve you right there. And I think you've really given people like a place to feel good about themselves. Yeah. It's nuts. And I'll say another thing on the graduation, because you guys asked me to come to some graduations, and I have been. But every time I get an email about coming to a graduation, it's like it's a heavy moment for me, because I know if I can schedule it, I'm gonna fucking cry like a baby every freaking time I come, because it never fails. Like the stories that come out from these people that you're listening to, and maybe 12 to 16 people, I forget the size of classes, and everybody shares to a certain degree differently. but man, some just put it out there and package exactly why you should exist and why it's important to do what you guys do. And it you're right, it never gets old.
Yeah, yeah, and they are overwhelming. They are the greatest way. We usually do them on Fridays, and that's on purpose because you can't. It takes a while to recover.
Yeah,
but it's also a great way to end a week. But to see. To see the individuals again, to see that transformation, and to see them with their families. I mean, that's the really cool thing, and the stories you hear, Spike, and it's the same story, but it's different all the time.
Of course,
but,
yeah.
But there's always a version of, this is the first thing I've ever completed besides a prison term.
Yeah,
this is the first time my mom is here, and this is the first time I'm ever going to be able to do something that she's proud of.
Yes.
Or, I can't wait for my son to see me walk across that stage. It's remarkable.
Becomes a little bit of the pinnacle of their life, and like the moment they changed for themselves. Yeah. And it gets really heavy. I mean, and so I mean, to take it even one step further, as you know, Mike very well, like I do, former graduate of DC Central Kitchen. He's worked for me at 3 different parts of my companies, and to see people that have come from exactly what we just talked about, underserved community, a background, maybe some criminal stuff, some health issues, whatever it may be, this guy is thriving.
Yep.
You guys unlocked a fierce restaurateur animal within this man. I think he sits on your board as well.
He
right?
is on our board of directors, yes.
Which is tell me a little bit about Mike, because for me, like I just saw him in my office yesterday. I get to work with him very much, but not only is he running 3 separate restaurants for our company, he's handling all the hiring, the training, the staff morale, the quality of menus, the ordering. He travels to different states to oversee things. This guy's also bought 3 different real estate. He has like 3 different houses. He Airbnbs. He's got like his side hustles that he's doing. Like, the guy's a true entrepreneur. Yeah. You unlocked and changed this man's life completely. I mean, he did, right. But the program brought him there.
Yep. Well, I think what you see, or what we see often, is you can never overlook the value of just an opportunity. And all of us, well, I won't speak for you.
No,
I'll speak for
me.
myself.
I'm in on this. Whatever you say, I'm in on.
Some bad decisions. We've made some mistakes.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And by virtue of where I was born and grew up, a lot of my mistakes or errors in judgment didn't have the long-term repercussions that some of my colleagues.
Key point.
Right.
Key point.
That the same thing done where I was growing up on as I said, the mean streets of Potomac, Maryland, had that same thing happened just a couple miles from where I went to high school at Gonzaga over in Southeast.
Yeah.
The results in long-term ramifications would have been far different.
I love that you point that out. I don't think people understand that.
It's
enough.
It's something that is, actually, yes. Most people don't. People don't get that, and it's something that we see every day, and it couldn't be more clear. And this is one of the things, and we might veer off here for a second, but one of the things that drives me crazy, especially in the political realm right now, is this sense that if someone doesn't have a job, right, it's their fault. They're lazy. If someone's hungry, all they would have to do is go get a job.
Exactly.
And if because I did it, more or less, it's a lot easier to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. First of all, when you have boots, and second of all, if you look more like I do. And it's just that simple. And to unfortunately, there are way too many people in this country, and way too many politicians telling people in this country that whole idea of systemic inequality doesn't exist. That's just nonsense. And until we have an honest conversation and a recognition that yes, there is massive, significant systemic racism, economic racism that still exists in this country. we are never going to get to a better place and have an honest conversation about how we can be
Yeah.
more equitable across the board. So there is massive differences in where you were born, where you live, how you look, what is going to happen to you, and what opportunities you are going to have. And so at the kitchen, one of our, what we just try to do is give everyone an opportunity.
Yeah.
And it is the power of opportunity, right? The value of a job. No one wants to sit no one wants to be in a homeless shelter.
No.
Those places are god awful. No one wants to be in prison, right? No one wants to be on SNAP. No one wants that. And what we see time and time and time again, if you provide a fair, respectful, dignified opportunity, folks are going to take advantage of that.
Take it and run with it.
It's that simple.
A dignified opportunity.
A dignified opportunity,
Yeah.
right? And those are different things. We see the same thing with the food, for example, that we sell to corner stores in the city's food apartheid areas, right? There is a vast. I mean, you talk about inequity. There are 4 grocery stores, full service grocery stores for 160,000 people that live in Washington D.C., the nation's capital, right?
No.
And that's east of the river, east of the Anacostia River. There's a stretch up in upper northwest on Wisconsin Avenue where within a mile and a half there are 7 full-service grocery stores. So one for about every maybe 2,000 people, and then east of the river there's one for about every 40,000 people. So you can't tell me that that's not inequitable, right?
Yeah.
So there is a massive difference. And when we put fresh, healthy, respectful-looking food in those corner stores, in those areas of the city that don't have access to grocery stores, people buy them. You put it at a reasonable price, an affordable price, and you make sure it's fresh, it's packaged. So there is, if given the opportunity,
Yes.
people will take it.
Yeah.
And that's what we see. And people like Mike Hall, your guy, is a perfect example of someone who has taken an opportunity and said, yes, this is what I want. Just like I did when I came to the kitchen. Like, I want something more. I want something that I want to do something my kids can be proud of.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait in line to get a handout from someone.
Yeah.
I don't want to, that's not what I want. And he has taken advantage of that, like many of the 2,300 graduates we've had at DC Central Kitchen now.
Just one example.
And
one person.
doing amazing things.
I love it. Listen, I made you a pizza.
Right on.
We're going to keep the conversation going, but I got the late email if you wanted an Asian-esque style something. I came up with something spicy and sweet, but that's it. Is that the pizza right there? Yeah, go ahead, grab a slice if you want. Do we have plates or yeah, perfect. This is coming to the point on the podcast where we make you guys jealous. We eat a little pizza. And by the way, Mike always has a slice of pizza from every podcast here. I just want to say, but this one is especially his. There we go. Classic. You're going to give us your pizza review, all right. I'm sure. All right. What's your favorite pizza place in DC?
We the pizza?
He passed the test.
Are there other pizza places in DC?
He passed the test. Yeah, he passed it.
Wait, what's your favorite burger place in DC? Don't overthink it, Mike.
Are there other places? Good stuff. I don't know.
Mike is a loyal. He's a loyal.
What's your favorite taco restaurant?
A loyal guy. Thank you, Jason. We'll get promotion for all the brands. Actually, AOC was in 2 days in a row.
Really?
Restaurants today. I took a picture with her. She came in a good stuff eater. She ordered a fried chicken sandwich. She loved it. Not that I was stalking her and watching her eat it.
Yeah.
But she loved it. And then she came back today. Had
Good
it again.
for you.
AOC in the house.
This is delicious, Spike. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I put a little sriracha and honey on it. I don't think the hot honey trend is over yet. So I put a little honey on it, a little sriracha,
And pep is my go-to.
Pep is your go-to. I know you're a pep. I know you're a pep guy. I'm a pep guy too. Actually, it's my go-to. The small pep. I got you small pep. That's
not to Buffalo.
Yeah.
My wife's from Buffalo.
She knows what is happening. Let's, Mark. While we eat this delicious food, make people. Oh, go ahead, Jay.
I have a question for our guest.
Sure. Sure. I mean, very rare do you have a question for me, but
So, Mike, so I'm a recovering advisor to the mayor. You like what I did there? We love. I mean, when we worked there, and obviously, like equities, like our famous word of always we're trying to improve. Access to healthcare, access to food, access to a job, all are contributing factors to how someone raises a family, and goes.
Jason,
left
get to your
right.
question for God's sake. Jeez,
well,
what is going on here? You're losing me.
So I was setting the table.
Just messing with you.
No. So because of your work in equity and all your projects and programs that are scalable and other people have replicated, do you guys now have influence with the region in terms of food policy and some of like entanglements with like Safeway that the city hasn't been involved with, where you can't build a grocery store X amount of miles away from like a current brand, to try to cut the red tape or just end the red tape to kind of
Like, do you guys push policies? Basically,
Yeah.
what you're asking?
Yeah.
Are you able to push
I
policy?
was trying to hype them up a little bit.
Yeah.
to all the
Yeah,
good
yeah.
stuff that-
I know. I love it. I love it.
So over the years, yes, we have gotten more involved in policy discussions, mostly on the local level. We were involved, as Spike was, with the Biden, the summit on food and health 2 years ago now, almost. But we work we're very active locally in terms of policy. What I would say is the way I've always looked at us, I refer to us as practicing advocates. So what we try to do is show what's possible by showing it. So when we talk about things like, say, minimum wage versus living wage, like we had made a commitment probably 15 years ago now that we would always be ahead of at what the time was the district's living wage. Like we would always, our entry wage would always be at least $1 more. And that's in addition to the significant benefits that we provided for our staff. And then we would track what that meant. Like, how quickly do people come off of SNAP? How quickly do people come out of supportive housing? What other issues may not happen in a household? So we can actually say that we know that the difference between the minimum wage and the living wage results in X. So we don't have to write a white paper about it or get into a philosophical argument about what is micro economically possible. We can say, well, we know this because we do this. The whole thing, when the Healthy Corners program about putting food in stores in areas that don't have grocery stores, a lot of that was to dispel the myth that folks in areas that are more economically marginalized won't buy fresh food. Well, the reason why most people think that's true is because usually there's no fresh food to be bought. So no one ever in the history of the world has bought something that doesn't exist.
That's not available.
That's not available, right? Yeah. Like, so yes, you're going to be right. Yes, but we again can show if we do this, we do it at a reasonable price. We do it's packaged this way and that way. So we get into all of those. So some of the more technicals, like the distances of grocery store, we're not really involved in those kinds. But wages, we talk a lot about returning citizens' opportunities in employment, right? We were very much involved in the ban the box issue that was sort of a big thing a few years ago. It's turned out, I don't think it's really done as much as we had hoped it would do, but we absolutely want to advocate for opportunities for folks that are coming out of prison back into the community. And we can say, so this is probably one of the most economically powerful arguments that we could make, or anyone could make, for creating opportunities for returning citizens. Everyone I think knows that the criminal justice system is a massive, massive failure in America on a scale that
You don't say.
is not matched anywhere in the world, right? But we often stop at just thinking about the numbers, the staggering and criminal numbers of people that are actually incarcerated. What we really need to focus on is that 70, of the people that get out of prison and come home will end up reoffending and going back to prison, mostly because they can't get a job. So if you're back home and you have a family, you need to support a family.
Yeah.
Again, there's a certain amount of there's pride, and that's why we talk about pride in a job, value in a job. And if you can't do that, and you need to survive, and you know how to do one thing, that's what is going to happen, and odds are you're going to go back to prison. If someone has come from prison, comes into our program, graduates our program, their chance of reoffending and going back is about 3%.
Wow, that's a huge.
3.
That's a big number difference.
That's a big number, and it's bigger when you consider that it costs all of us as taxpayers about $50,000 a year to keep someone in prison. So it costs about the same amount to keep someone in prison as it does to send them to college.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you send someone to college, you're anticipating some sort of return on that investment. When you're sending someone to prison, the only thing that we're pretty sure of is that we're going to send them back and have to have the privilege of paying more later.
Yeah.
So the idea of putting up barriers to getting jobs for people coming out of prison is crazy.
Yeah.
And so those are the kind of laws that we really want to advocate, again, or advocate for creating opportunities. And again, as a practicing advocate, not as a thought necessarily, we're not a think tank, we're not an academic institution.
Practicing advocate, I love
but
that,
to
yeah.
working with those other organizations to say, look, we'll show you.
Show you the model.
And
Yeah.
half of our staff are graduates of our program, and at least half of those, probably more, are returning citizens.
Yeah.
And they are some of the most reliable, dependable employees we have. But if we had a policy that just because you were in prison, regardless of why or what for or when, we cannot hire you, the half of our staff would be back in prison.
Yeah.
That's just insane. So we do need. We want the kitchen, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted, to be living theater, to have volunteers come in here every day to work with individuals
See
who
the
have
practicing
had this,
advocacy, see it in person.
and to see
Yeah.
it, right? So
Yeah.
we don't have to be preachy. We don't have to be theoretical. We can just see it.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Oh, Jason, great question, and I'd love to hear that you guys are taking a larger stance in that, because it's someone needs to pave that road. Let's talk about an idea you came up with, which many other people have tried to replicate, but we'll say it right here on the podcast. This was the original idea of the food fight, right? And we're about celebrating the 20th year of it this year, I think, right?
Yes.
And listen, I've worked with you. I don't know how long I've worked, but I've co-hosted for quite some time now. We've had the likes of Anthony Bourdain when he was here. God bless his soul.
Mm-hmm.
As a major host, he used to do it with Jose. Now I do it with Jose. We've had a couple of guest hosts and judges. It just seems like it's one of the pinnacle events in DC. It seems like it's one of your best fundraising events ever. It's such a fun night. Tell people a little bit about it and what it means to you. This moment that you've created for 20 years that does a lot. And, yeah.
Well, I think one of the things. Again, I said earlier that the restaurants, the hotels, the chefs, the hospitality folks have been really our success has been built on their backs. And as the world changed, the world of chef celebrities were born when you really started on Top Chef.
Bravo, celebrity,
dude! I'm telling you that we were right there at the right time, at the right place, and jumped right on those fucking coattails, man.
Yeah.
We're like, yes, we're on this, and again, there were so many chefs like yourself, like Tony, like Tom Colicchio, like Jose, Padma Lakshmi, all these celebrities, Mani, all these folks who want to be part of this work that we're doing. We were able to draw our community wider because of your chef celebrity, right? So bringing the people, folks in for a fun, raucous, roaring night of incredible food and drink and experiencing the stuff that most people only see on Bravo or Food Network in live and in person is crazy. So we're getting exposed to or exposing ourselves to a whole world of folks that we might not otherwise come into contact with. So we have really, this really opened up or expanded our recognition or our position in the public realm, and
Totally.
and along with I mean, the same social media. It's all sort of right at that same time,
Yeah.
and it just exploded. And this has become an event now that I think people really look forward to. I know, even in my time in the restaurant, chefs again are asked to do so many of these events, and you could do one a week practically in DC.
Absolutely.
There's all everyone's got a cause, everyone's got a ribbon.
This is the one we put on the calendar.
But this
though.
is
this is the one we put on the calendar early.
Yeah, and I'm really proud of the fact that having been on both sides, one of the things that I did very early on, and this was a little hard at the beginning because we were financially we were banking, we were all in on this event.
Right.
But I really felt, again, having my experience, is that we were one of the first, if not the first group that actually offered each restaurant a stipend to cover at least the cost of the food.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot to bring out staff and to put all
Sure.
this stuff, and I get that. So I think that meant something. I wanted to make sure that the load in and out was really easy, because I remember going to some of these events, and if the equipment wasn't there, the carts weren't there, that was stuff. So we wanted to make it easy for the restaurants, and want to make it fun.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I've seen, and I'm just so thankful and grateful for this, is that the chefs themselves are coming to this event. It's not someone else. It's
No,
and
the
they're
big
not
chefs,
sending,
the Eric Repairs, the Tom
Yeah.
Colicchios, the
Yeah.
Rocco Despirito. I mean,
Yeah.
the big chefs are
Yeah.
coming to the event.
They're coming to this one, and the big guns are coming out with the food too. I mean, the
Yes.
food. It's not the corn chowder. Everyone's not
Yeah.
like 20 corn chowders.
Totally. No, the food's coming out.
It's good food, and people are thinking about this and really wanting to show off, and that's awesome.
I remember my battle. I won. I beat Scott Druno. Killed him.
Killed them. So I mean, that has been so much fun
Yeah.
too, Spike. 'Cause, I have to say,
I did lose, but we're going to scratch that podcast with Scott Druno anyway.
but
so.
I think it's been interesting to see over 20 years too, this whole new generation of chefs come along.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning, I was the one calling, Bob Kincaid and Roberto Donna and Jeff Boobin and
Totally.
Robert Wheat, but that first really crew of chefs that sort of put Washington on the
on the
food
map,
scene.
yeah.
And then and now this new generation, it's just
just
so
coming out of the
cool to see.
woodworks.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
You had Johanna won, I think, or came runner
Couple
up
years.
a couple years ago, and I mean, she's amazing. Have you been to Amma yet? Down
No.
the street? Oh, you got to go check her.
Yeah.
She just opened, so it's fresh. But she just opened. I mean, she's literally like you could walk.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
it's that close, and I've been introduced to chefs that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Through Food Fight.
Yeah.
That's how much of a chefy event it has. And so when is it happening this year? November 7th?
November 7th.
November 7th. Guys, if you're listening, people travel from all over the United States for this event. This isn't just DC. I mean, it's the bulk of DC folks, but people are taking trains.
Oh,
driving,
I have friends coming in from
flying,
all around the country.
all over the
for
country
for this event
to
Yeah.
support.
No, it's great, and what's really cool is we're getting lobbied now.
Yeah.
For the PR people are coming to us and saying, "Hey, look at my chef is doing." And
Yeah, of course.
and,
Yeah.
and it's sort of cool. But again, in some ways, a small way. It's a little bit of a way that we can give back a bit to the hospitality industry.
Yes.
I feel it's bigger when we give them a good employee, but it's really a fun night out where we can really expose people, and I do believe that the folks that come to the event really want to support the kitchen, and we make it very clear to them that if you want to support us, support these restaurants,
That's
support
right.
these chefs.
That's right. And I love that, and the industry I know loves that you guys do this event. It has an enormous amount of respect for the event. What do you got, Jay?
No, I was just wanted Mike and Spike, if you guys could just set the table and let the audience know what's it like being a participant and attending the event. What do they see?
Yeah, they just see carnage on the stage between Jose, Andres, and I. Jose does his thing, and I spend the rest of the day translating so people can understand what's
Yeah.
actually happening on stage. No, it's a food fight. It's what it actually is. I mean, we get a bunch of chefs There's I think 2 to 3 different rounds, and they go at it. There's 15 minutes left. They got a huge pantry because you guys got amazing sponsors. There's always like a secret ingredient unveiling of like this secret ingredient. And then they just go for it, and they end up creating such great dishes at times. Some are better than others. It's a food fight. And then we have a panel of judges, just like Top Chef or Iron Chef or any of those shows that literally sit there. Ryan Zim comes. Yeah. He's figured it out. Ryan Zim's figured it out. He's come every year so far for many years.
Yeah, he's going to keep coming, I think.
Yeah.
So like many things at the kitchen, we try to take something that's been done and that people are familiar with, they know about it, and then put a twist on it to make it a little more fun, a little more memorable.
Yeah.
So the idea of 80 restaurants giving out samples and mixologists and drinks, that has been done in DC and other cities for years, and great fun. Zufari, Taste of the Nation, all these things. We've all loved doing them, being at them. But the food fight, the battle, is the part that we added, like putting on stage, again, playing off the Bravo Top Chef, Iron Chef world that people are crazy about. Said, okay, let's take 4 hot rising chefs in DC, have them battle out with a secret ingredient that we unveil for each battle, and then bring on folks, the national celebrities like Chef, like Spike, like Jose, like Bourdain, like Padma, like Mani, like Andrew Zimmer.
Yeah, the who's who.
All of these folks, and have them up and commentating. And the way we try to do it now is we really see this as inviting the guests into a cocktail party in someone's house. So we have Spike will be up on the stage with Tommy McFly and Jose and others, and then we'll have these other guests, and they'll be on a couch and sitting down and having cocktails, and it's this conversation that happens, and that amongst these chef food folks,
it's an insider.
And that you're there.
It's an inside look.
It's like being in the filming of Top Chef.
It's like being in the weeds.
We're constantly in the weeds, and guys, tickets are still on sale for those out there listening.
Yes.
I think we'll have we'll probably not have aired this, so that doesn't really matter. No, we'll see. Maybe we'll bump this one up. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we'll bump this one up. I know I want to be cognizant of time. Mike, you're doing so much good. I know you got to get back to it, and you got family, but I do want to hear a little bit, and I don't know how much you can share because I know a little bit, maybe too much at times, but like, what's the future of DC Central Kitchen? What are some things that have happened here in the last 6 months that are huge for DC Central Kitchen's growth? And do you see this, you mentioned like about this prison stat, right? And about 70% versus the 3%, like, how global can this get? How national for starters can this get?
Sure.
Forget global, but how, tell me.
Well, so the big move for us was getting to this space, and we've been here about 1.5 years now. So we do have plans actually to take another 10,000 square feet in this building, because why not, right?
Sure.
And that's probably going to be enough for a while. And we're still honestly trying to figure this space out, trying to live in it. We did a monstrous jump. I mean, we literally went from 6,000 meals to 16,000 meals. Whew. That's big. Huge, and maybe a little too quick, But we're working through that. I want to make sure we can do 16,000 perfectly before we start doing 17, 18, 20, and 25. And those are the goals that you were talking about earlier that we're looking towards in 2025 or at some point down the road. Our big goal is to increase. Ultimately, the most impactful thing that we can do is increase the number of students we train and find employment for in the city, in the hospitality business. So that is always the focus, and one of the reasons for taking part of that extra space will be to create another classroom, so we can actually have 2 classes running simultaneously. So that's a big thing. And to get to the second part of your question, we have always. We've spent a lot of time over the years sharing what we do as an open source model so others will copy and replicate and improve upon, hopefully, what we do in cities across the country. So right now, there are about 100 or so communities that have a version of DC Central Kitchen. I don't think many do all of what we do, but many do pieces of what we do, and that's an amazing thing. It has to be of and for the community. And one of the things that this space provides us here, now that we have meeting rooms and a more respectful kind of place to come and visit and learn, is that we will host more gathering opportunities, more learning opportunities for people to come and spend more meaningful time, not just a day or an hour, but a week, a couple weeks, work in our kitchen, work with our chefs, work with our training team, and then take that knowledge and go back and implement it in your community. So we don't have the desire or the ability probably really to become Detroit Central Kitchen or Austin Central Kitchen, but we can work with folks in those cities and more, so they can take what we have, leave what they don't want, and again, hopefully improve upon it and make it work for their community.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You guys are doing so much good here, Mike. I can't, it's good. It's an honor to be your friend over these years. I'm so happy that you came on it's one of my favorite podcasts. I have to tell you, I've been getting these Joe Schmo chefs on the podcast. I need to up the ante here and get more of these type of guys. No, this has been, I think we covered a lot. And I think, there's a great background story about where you've come from, which, I just learned today, and it's just I when I think of DC Central Kitchen and my work here, I just become so proud of it, and I look forward to the food fight every freaking year. We're going to battle maybe this year, I think, a little bit. Maybe we have a little secret battle this year.
Yes, I think we do have one of those. But, Spike, I appreciate it. And I remember vividly, the first time you rolled up with your family, which I will never forget, because I thought we were getting Spike. The whole man is like, what's up with this? And Spike just looks at me and goes, that's how we roll.
That's how we roll. That's
okay.
right.
All right on, man. All right, very good. And so I met Spike and the family, and that's how it's been. And I appreciate that. I'm grateful for that. Your sister sat on our board. She's amazing.
Yes.
Your parents are wonderful, but you are certainly representative of the giving, generous hospitality community that exists around the country, I believe, in the world, but certainly here in DC, in the greater DC area. And again, without your support and the support of your colleagues in the industry, we wouldn't be here. So we're thrilled to be in the space. We're thrilled to be part of the podcast. We're thrilled to continue to be part of the food world here in DC.
I love it. And Mike, just as an out for you, just why don't you let people know if there's volunteers out there, how they can get involved with DC Central Kitchen if they're local?
Sure. We do have volunteer opportunities, but only 365 days a year. So you can go to dccentralkitchen.org and click on Join Us up top, and that'll drop you down to volunteer. You can sign up there. You can reach out over the website if you have a group. We have groups in every day. Individuals, we would love people to come down here, chop, slice, dice, and get a taste of DC Central Kitchen.
Yeah, guys, come on, get your knife kits, come down and learn how to brew noise and julienne. All right, thanks, Mike. We loved having you on. We'll have to do a part 2 on this and on the growth of DC Central Kitchen. But for now, we are going to be out. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this captivating episode of In the Weeds with our guest, Mike Curtin Jr. You can get involved, support, and learn more about DC Central Kitchen at dccentralkitchen.org. A special shout out to our fantastic sponsors, Just Iced Tea and We The Pizza. Discover the refreshing taste of Just Iced Tea at eatthechange.com. And satisfy your pizza cravings with We The Pizza at wethepizza.com. You won't regret it, right, Mike?
Absolutely not.
A huge thank you to our broadcast home, DC Central Kitchen, for their unwavering support. They're not just serving up food, they're serving up real change. Learn more or get involved at dccentralkitchen.org. To catch up on past episodes or subscribe to future ones, head over to intheweedspod.com, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. The kitchen may be closed for now, but the conversation never stops. We are 86 for now. Until next time.